This ad-free podcast is part of your premium subscription to The Lever. Thanks so much for being a paying subscriber.
The Lever. Subscriber-supported journalism that holds power accountable.
From The Lever's reader-supported newsroom, this is Lever Time. I'm David Sirota. Artificial intelligence seems to be coming for us all, whether we like it or not. It offers the possibility of scientific innovation and discovery, but according to top technology experts, it also creates the possibility of human extinction. So what are we doing to at least protect ourselves from the potential dangers? On today's episode of Lever Time, we go inside the crazy political battle over artificial intelligence. This is a tale of tech titans and the politicians they own, all playing out inside what increasingly feels like a sci-fi world of machines on the verge of becoming self-aware. What should we do to make sure these machines don't ruin us all? What can we do to make sure this technology doesn't get out of control? And is it already too late? That's coming up on today's episode.
Once, he was programmed to destroy the future.
I'm a middle-aged dad and a child of the 1980s and early 1990s, and I now have a teenage son. So I'm in that stage of life where I'm showing him all of my favorite movies from my childhood. And we recently watched one of the true classics, Terminator 2.
Now his mission
Get down.
is to protect it.
T2 was a movie about good artificial intelligence coming back in time to save the world from evil artificial intelligence.
Come with me if you want to live.
This movie really holds up. And not just because of all the iconic lines and action scenes, but also because its cautionary message feels more relevant than ever here in this brand new era of AI. When the Arnold Schwarzenegger good Terminator gives that final fiery thumbs up, we're meant to have learned the lesson that creating artificial intelligence beyond our own intelligence capabilities is a very dangerous thing. But in watching Terminator 2 34 years after it came out, I realized that one key plot line doesn't really hold up at all. It's a plot line that, quite disturbingly, seems more fantastical than even all the time travel and the lifelike robots. It's that scene with the tech guy Miles Bennett Dyson, who's been leading the battle to create artificial intelligence, and who then meets the monster robot of the future that he's basically helped bring into the world.
Who are you people?
Shaw.
In this scene, the Terminator peels the human-like skin off his own arm and shows Dyson the steel skeleton underneath. And Dyson suddenly realizes that the artificial intelligence that he's creating in the present will be used in the future to kill off all of humanity.
Dyson listened while the Terminator laid it all down. Skynet, Judgment Day, the history of things to come. It's not every day that you find out you're responsible for 3 billion deaths. He took it pretty well.
I feel like I'm gonna throw up.
And then came the most unrealistic part of the movie, the part where the tech guy Dyson actually learns a lesson and decides to change his behavior.
No one must follow your work.
Right. All right, then we have to destroy all the stuff at the lab, the files, the disk drives, everything.
This feels like the scene we're all living in right now. Here we are, seeing more and more harrowing warnings about the dangerous implications of the rise and unregulated spread of artificial intelligence, and yet the real-life tech guys aren't stopping their work, slowing down, or even heeding the warnings. They're plowing full speed ahead. Consider a sequence of news over the last few years. In 2023, a group of 30,000 technology experts, thinkers, and industry leaders, including Elon Musk, signed a letter calling for, quote, all AI labs to immediately pause for at least 6 months the training of AI systems more powerful than the ones we currently have. They expressed concerns that the systems could get out of control. This past December, Nobel Prize-winning professor Geoffrey Hinton, often touted as the godfather of artificial intelligence, appeared on BBC Radio with an even scarier warning.
You said there's a 10% chance that AI will lead to human extinction within the next 3 decades. Has anything changed your analysis of that?
Not really. I think 10 to 20.
Oh, you're going up.
If anything. You see, we've never had to deal with things more intelligent than ourselves before.
These warnings all may seem hyperbolic, but they're based on a legitimate fear that, like in the world of Terminator, we may lose control of these systems. So what does lose control mean? Well, just consider a brand new study from researchers at the AI companies OpenAI, DeepMind, Meta, and Anthropic. The study found that tech companies may be on the verge of no longer being able to even track how their own AI systems are thinking and processing information. The study found that AI systems might become, quote, less monitorable if they know their chain of thought is monitored. If that idea of a computer becoming conscious and defying its human owners sounds vaguely familiar, it's because it seems to point to the whole self-awareness apocalypse from, you guessed it, the Terminator.
Skynet begins to learn at a geometric rate. It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th. In a panic, they try to pull the plug.
Skynet fights back.
Yes.
Short of the annihilation of the human species, tech companies' AI build-out is already promising to wreak all sorts of other havoc on society. For example, when it comes to the environment, this year, consulting giant Accenture issued a report about the data centers powering AI. The report found, quote, the exponential rise of AI is having a dramatic and unsustainable impact on the planet's energy use, carbon emissions, and water consumption. When it comes to the economy, the CEO of AI giant Anthropic predicted that AI could eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and increase unemployment 10 to 20% in the next 5 years. When it comes to education, New York Magazine recently reported on how the spread of artificial intelligence has fueled a cheating epidemic on college campuses. At the same time, an MIT study found that while artificial intelligence is depicted as helping kids learn, in fact, the use of systems like ChatGPT correlates with lower brain engagement and cognitive underperformance. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's own AI-powered chatbot briefly started spewing anti-Semitism recently. Other AI systems are spreading all sorts of misinformation masked as reliable information. And AI-powered bots have been accused of encouraging depression and suicidal thoughts among users. Of course, the news about artificial intelligence isn't all bad, and not every AI enthusiast is Dr. Evil or Skynet. Artificial intelligence really does offer the potential for all sorts of positives in the world, from medical and pharmaceutical innovation to data analysis to reducing paperwork and repetitive tasks. That is exciting. But what about all those warning signs? Are they prompting America's leaders to urge some caution and restraint? Are they prompting reminders of that old first do no harm principle? Unfortunately, not really. The people running the government have mostly offered the opposite, like President Trump's speech last week about the AI industry.
We're going to make this industry absolutely the top, because right now it's a beautiful baby that's born. We have to grow that baby and let that baby thrive. We can't stop it. We can't stop it with politics. We can't stop it with foolish rules and even stupid rules.
Trump has already started to put that sentiment into action. For instance, his Pentagon officials recently awarded $200 million worth of contracts to AI companies to integrate AI into America's Defense Department. At the same time, Trump's Defense Department officials have slashed the staffing and the budget of the Pentagon office that's tasked with testing the safety of artificial intelligence and weapons systems. And that pro-AI push is not just happening in the executive branch. It was also on display at a U.S. Senate hearing with tech CEOs this past May. Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz kicked off that hearing with this declaration.
To lead in AI, the United States cannot allow regulation, even the supposedly benign kind, to choke innovation or adoption.
OpenAI CEO Sam Altman was there at the hearing. He'd previously warned about the dangers of AI. But when Cruz asked him about the possibility of regulatory limits, Those warnings were nowhere to be found.
How harmful would it be to winning the race for AI if America goes down the road of the EU and creates a heavy-handed, prior approval government regulatory process for AI?
I think that would be disastrous. I am nervous about standards being set too early. I believe the industry is moving quickly towards figuring out the right protocols and standards here, and we need the space to innovate and to move quickly.
Altman and the other tech CEOs at that Senate hearing were on Capitol Hill with a specific agenda, one that they were working on with Ted Cruz, and that would explode in the US Senate only a few weeks later. That crazy political story is where this week's episode begins. It's a story from Levertime producer Natalie Bettendorf that tells us about the larger politics of artificial intelligence.
A few weeks ago, I went to Capitol Hill and met up with Mariana Sotomayor. She's a congressional reporter for the Washington Post.
Is there a place that you go to decompress or just have a quiet moment when things are feeling really crazy?
I love sitting outside on the House steps. You look at the Capitol and you're like, whoa, reminds you how lucky you are to be here.
I wanted to talk to Mariana about something we've been covering on the show in recent weeks, the One Big Beautiful Bill. At this point, the bill had passed the House and was still waiting to clear the Senate. I had questions about one particular aspect of this bill that was making a lot of waves.
There's technically no federal legislation saying what you can and can't do on AI.
That's right. Despite all those warnings about the potential for artificial intelligence to literally wipe out all of humanity, there is no federal law governing AI. So what did Congress try to slip into the Big Beautiful Bill? Some new safeguards to try to prevent Skynet from killing us all? Nope, the opposite. A small little line with big implications. A provision that would prevent any state or local regulation on AI for the next 10 years. If passed, the provision was going to greatly limit the ability of state lawmakers to enact regulations that restrict the use of AI, which would have been a huge win for big tech companies who have pushed for light touch regulation of artificial intelligence. The provision had been introduced by Senator Ted Cruz, but the core of the provision came from a proposal put forth by House Speaker Mike Johnson. Companies that were lobbying for this provision included ChatGPT's parent company, OpenAI, the AI-powered defense contractor Anduril, and the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. And naturally, the Trump administration was backing it as well. But not everyone was on board. A lot of people came out against it, including child safety groups, tech policy experts, and lawmakers from both sides of the aisle. Folks you'd expect, like Senator Elizabeth Warren.
I'm going to use every tool in my toolbox to strip this provision out of the bill.
But also folks you probably wouldn't expect.
I warn against the dangers of protecting a tech industry where we have no idea the future of what this industry will hold. AI is rapidly developing.
That's Republican MAGA icon Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, expressing her opposition after she'd voted for the bill.
When I voted for the One Big Beautiful Bill, I didn't know about this clause.
That's a pretty good reminder to read things before you sign them. When the provision arrived in the Senate, it got watered down. The moratorium of 10 years was reduced to 5 and allowed some child safety protections, thanks to an effort from Senator Marsha Blackburn. The language morphed, saying that if states regulated AI, the federal government could withhold their federal broadband funding. There was also a concerted effort from Senate Commerce Committee Republicans, who wanted to make sure that the provision complied with Senate rules prohibiting extraneous matters from being included in budget bills. Tech companies' AI regulation moratorium seemed set to pass before that July 4th deadline. It looked like it would just be included in the giant tax legislation, hitched to a moving legislative train with no way to isolate it for elimination. But then senators forced a public vote on the specific provision. And when lawmakers had to declare their stance on AI regulation publicly, they voted against the provision in a landslide. On July 1st, the Big Beautiful Bill passed the Senate without the AI provision. It had been voted out of the bill in an amendment ironically sponsored by Blackburn. It was a vote count rarely seen on the floors of Congress, 99-1. It was a victory for those warning about the dangers of AI, but also a smoking gun. Lawmakers had tried to slip this in undetected, but when they were called on the carpet to state their position for all of us to see, they abandoned ship, an admission that they knew they were trying to do something that most of us wouldn't like. The takeaway from that vote seemed to be that no one wanted to be caught voting on the side of big tech tycoons. But the spectacle was also a glimpse into the new dynamics of a Republican Party that relies on an uneasy alliance between working-class voters and tech oligarchs. Two groups whose agendas are often at odds. Just before the final vote, a hard push against the AI provision emerged among leaders of the working-class MAGA side of the party. People like Mike Davis and Steve Bannon.
Strip out this AI amnesty completely from the big, beautiful bill. This AI amnesty is bad for creators, it's bad for kids, it's bad for conservatives, it's bad for America.
That's Davis, a prominent lawyer in Trump world, appearing on the War Room podcast with Steve Bannon, who is a Trump strategist on the populist right. According to reporting from The Verge, Bannon and Davis were scheming to eradicate the provision. They were encouraging Blackburn to pull her support. They talked strategy with staffers. They even reportedly pushed Trump to stay tight-lipped about the fight over the provision. In the end, it was a battle that the War Room posse won resoundingly. A war on big tech, and one that, for now, kept MAGA Republicans in favor of AI regulation.
There should be no giveaway to these AI platforms. If you need to be a government-sponsored monopoly and coddled like this in order to compete, then you're in the wrong line of business.
Bannon and Davis's push to kill the AI moratorium exposed the tension in the fairly new alliance between Republicans' working-class base and tech tycoons. A poll of Trump voters from earlier this month showed that even though they tend to have a more positive perception of AI, 87% said they still want, quote, effective guardrails to protect people from being exploited by AI technology. In the end, Republican tech skeptics won this round. But the fight in Washington is far from over. After the break, how states are trying to deal with the spread of artificial intelligence, and why it's so difficult to rein in big tech. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Lever Time.
The development of AI predates OpenAI in that it technically started as a scientific discipline in 1956.
That's Karen Howe. She's a journalist and the author of a new book called Empire of AI: Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI.
In the early days of OpenAI, it was still largely discussed as a very academic endeavor. This idea that we are going to try and recreate human intelligence in computers.
Karen was one of the first journalists to get access to OpenAI and has been reporting on the company and artificial intelligence for the past several years. Among the things that struck her was the concerted effort by the company to get in the good graces of government.
It was driven by this idea that they ultimately wanted to shape policymakers' thinking so that when OpenAI continued to mature and develop as an organization, they would then have the relationships within Washington to leverage.
OpenAI worked to get as many meetings on the books as possible with folks in Washington. This all was happening just a couple of years into the organization's existence, Karen said.
If you're not just thinking about building a business and you're thinking about trying to build what they saw as a civilizationally transformative technology, they were like, eventually government's not going to need to be involved.
Like Mariana Sotomayor told me, there aren't any federal regulations on artificial intelligence at the moment. But according to the New York Times, all 50 states have introduced bills regarding AI regulation in the past year. And most states have enacted laws that aim to protect consumers and children from harmful AI content.
To really understand what's happened in this country in AI regulation, you have to look at the states.
That's Dr. Scott Babwa Brennan. He's the director of New York University's Center on Technology Policy. Every year, his center puts out a report that examines what happened in the past year regarding AI regulation.
Last year, we counted something like, I think it was 107 AI bills that states passed.
And a lot of these bills are targeted at a specific harm. For instance, labels or bans of political ads that contain deceptive uses of generative AI.
We saw a number of states pass things like banning AI-generated child sexual abuse material or AI-generated revenge porn. We did also see one state, Colorado, pass this, what's sort of regarded as this comprehensive piece of regulation that had to do with trying to prevent algorithmic discrimination in high-risk models or certain models that are making these kind of really important decisions in our lives. Things like, who gets a mortgage or does insurance cover your trip to the doctor?
That failed provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill would have halted a lot of those existing regulations. Legislation like Kentucky SB 4, which protects people from AI-powered discrimination from state agencies, or Arkansas H 1877, which makes the creation or distribution of AI-generated sexual imagery of children illegal. Last year, a Florida teenager died by suicide after an intense relationship with an AI chatbot. The teen's mother filed a lawsuit against Character.ai, the chatbot service that her son used, claiming that the chatbot reinforced his suicidal ideation and, quote, made things worse.
This is an indication that we need to regulate in this space. A federal judge has said we need to look under the hood and see how was Character AI designed.
That's Zaman Qureshi. He's the co-chair of Design It For Us, which is a coalition of young people who are driving policies to protect their generation from social media and other kinds of technology.
These products that we're putting in the hands of kids without any guardrails is really disturbing if we're not giving kids the tools to figure out what they're using, how to use it properly. And also, it's dissipating or restricting their ability to have in-person social interaction. And that is a really core skill that growing up, I remember needing to learn, that our educators and our parents pushing us to learn.
If the provision had stayed in the One Big Beautiful Bill, it would have punished states trying to implement these guardrails that Zaman and Dr. Scott talk about, something a lot of big tech critics want because of slow action from Congress. But not everyone hated the provision. In fact, some were enthusiastic supporters of it because they said regulation can get in the way of innovation. That's what Neil Chilson told me.
1,000 different bills in this space looks pretty concerning to anybody who's trying to build this technology. They're wondering, am I going to have to hire a team of lawyers to help me just figure out whether or not I'm in compliance? And so I think Congress saw that as a problem. They saw the spending bill as an opportunity to address that problem.
Neil is the head of AI policy at the Abundance Institute. I asked Neil if the Institute is associated with the abundance. I'm talking about the philosophy that was popularized by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson's book, in which they argue that the nation's regulatory environment stifles development and access to resources, like housing. But as Neil explained to me, the Institute takes more of a center-right approach to the strategy.
Ezra and Derek take a different set of issues and maybe a different tactic than say the Abundance Institute takes, but I think we share their enthusiasm for a positive vision of building things and not just sitting back and letting things happen to us.
Neil's an opponent of AI regulation. He argues that the regulations are not specific enough because AI has so many different facets in so many different industries.
My question is always like, what specific harm are we worried about here? And is there a gap in the current state law? If you commit fraud with or without AI, it's still illegal.
Neil said that he thinks current law is enough to protect people, and that by regulating AI, you interfere with the industry's ability to innovate and evolve.
Congress just passed the Take It Down Act, which bans the spreading of non-consensual deep fake pornography, right? So that's a real concern. That's probably the biggest concern that I heard about as soon as these image generation platforms came about. Congress did something about it.
This is pretty much what the abundance philosophy is all about. A fear of regulations, and specifically, a fear that they paralyze the public from being able to solve problems. In Neil's world, AI is a friend, not the enemy. He talks about regulations like they're anchors, weighing societies down, dooming them from reaching their full potential. It's part of a lifestyle philosophy he's developed known as the emergent order.
Emergent order is this idea from complexity theory and complex adaptive system science. And it's this idea, essentially, the colloquial term would be the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Emergent order is this idea that you can have simple rules often and small, not very capable elements And when they work together, they can create something that's much bigger than themselves.
Neil told me that this worldview has highly influenced how he thinks about artificial intelligence.
There's a lot of people that talk about like the threat of artificial superintelligence. And what I like to say is we already have superintelligence. Our markets and our society creates very complex types of order and outcomes that no one of us actually understands fully or can control.
In a lot of ways, artificial intelligence is science fiction coming to life. David mentioned the Terminator earlier, who just so happened to be governor of California when I was a kid. AI has been a cornerstone of science fiction since the genre was born. Normally, when I hear about AI in fiction, it's an evil robot or something villainous trying to destroy humanity.
Human beings are a disease, and we are the cure.
But sci-fi is also hopeful. There's almost as many examples of artificial intelligence not being human, but being our friend. When Neil and I were talking, I noticed how the shelves behind him were stuffed with sci-fi books. One was called Fall or Dodge in Hell, which is about a wealthy industrialist putting his brain onto a computer. I was curious if that book influenced his work on AI. After Jurassic Park came out, universities saw an explosion of interest in people wanting to study paleontology. The same was true about meteorology when the original Twister movie came out in 1996. And astronauts today still credit Star Trek or Star Wars for giving them their interest in space. So I asked Neil how that book on his shelf, written by futurist author Neal Stephenson, has shaped how he views AI and our role in determining policy around it.
Stephenson is really good at saying that it's not technologically deterministic, right? You don't just have a technology that drives all the change and it only goes in one direction, but that humans are also a big part of this, and the choices that they make really have a big impact on how the technology is used, how it's deployed, and how it benefits or doesn't the people around them.
Choices like regulation? After the break, we'll hear about how the government may already be too in bed with the AI companies to ever regulate them effectively. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Lever Time. Talking with both Zaman Qureshi, who is pro-AI regulation, and Neil Chilson, who's more anti, I realized that they both do have this notable similarity. They believe that AI has an important role to play in society, that it's not going anywhere, and we've got to accept that. Here's Zaman.
This could be helping find cures to diseases or creating a touch point for somebody who is looking to interface with their physician in a speedy way. Like, there are all these use cases that you could imagine that would be really beneficial for people.
And here's Neil.
I think there's a really strong chance, especially given the history of artificial intelligence thus far, that in 10 years, the stuff that we're calling AI now, we don't call it AI anymore. We just call it computers.
As Zaman told me, with great power comes great responsibility. And if this technology isn't going anywhere, we need to take a good look at what the harms are. And yet, the problem is that no one is quite sure what AI regulation should look like. It's a technology that spans so many industries and takes on so many forms. I heard this from almost everyone I spoke with. For instance, Netflix uses AI for customized suggestions on what you should watch. And many banks use AI to detect fraudulent purchases that fall outside of their customers' normal buying behavior. Here's Karen Howe again.
I like to use the analogy that AI is like the word transportation. You can have bicycles or rockets or self-driving cars or gas-guzzling trucks, and they're all obviously different forms of transportation, but with very different purposes and very different cost-benefit trade-offs. And AI is the same thing. Some of these technologies seemingly have no relation to one another other than the fact that they're ultimately trying loosely to recreate certain types of human capabilities.
That's one of the biggest concerns with regulating AI, even from people who research tech safety, like Dr. Scott Babwa-Brennan. How do you balance consumer protection and consumer safety with allowance for continued innovation of a technology that is clearly here to stay? Experts say specificity is the solution. What makes regulation successful in a bureaucracy like the US government is being clear what the harm is and exactly what's being done to stop it. But for Trump, regulating AI means falling behind.
China's not doing it, and if you're going to be beating China, and right now we're leading China very substantially in AI.
And it also means giving up vested interests. Zaman told me that another obstacle to building more guardrails is the AI companies themselves.
The tech lobby is going to push back. They come in with, one set of talking points for liberal lawmakers and another for conservative lawmakers. And, once they've dominated a state legislature or federal government, it's hard to overcome.
It's strange to think of the War Room posse, of Mike Davis and Steve Bannon, coming to the rescue on behalf of all Americans.
I think the majority of people, especially if you look at polling, say that the status quo isn't working in one way or another for them, whether it's for their kids, whether it's for themselves, whether it's just the power that these companies have accumulated. And so how do we balance the ability for companies to innovate and create opportunities for people to interact online while also creating experiences that benefit people and users?
There's this soundbite that I remember from OpenAI's Sam Altman back in May of 2023.
We think that regulatory intervention by governments will be critical to mitigate the risks of increasingly powerful models.
He's testifying in front of a Senate subcommittee, and he sounds like he's trying to ask Congress to regulate his company.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong. And we want to be vocal about that. We want to work with the government to prevent that from happening. It's one of my areas of greatest concern.
The irony is that big, growth-obsessed corporations like OpenAI hate regulation, especially if it affects their balance sheets. And for the tech companies betting everything on AI, it's the ultimate obstacle to them continuing to grow their products and gain more power. AI companies don't just want to stay unregulated by the federal government. They want to be integrated into it.
The current US government has made quite clear their position that they just are not actually interested in regulating these companies much at all. And much more, they're interested in actually allying with Silicon Valley to continue to fortify the nation's power, both domestically and abroad.
Just look at the $200 million contract that OpenAI won with the US Department of Defense last month. And if you need more proof...
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much.
That's Trump at his inauguration earlier this year. Sitting in some of the most exclusive seating were several of the most prominent CEOs in big tech: Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. The very next day, Trump announced Stargate, a $500 billion project. That's $500 billion for AI infrastructure. And who was standing next to him? OpenAI's very own Sam Altman.
We wouldn't be able to do this without you, Mr. President.
Now, you might be feeling reassured. I mean, hey, after the inauguration, Trump and those tech guys really tried to get that provision blocking AI regulation into the One Big Beautiful Bill, and they failed. You might be feeling like you felt at the end of Terminator 1, some big relief that Skynet was held at bay. But as that franchise's most famous line reminds us, things rarely end that easily.
I'll be back.
Just weeks after the Senate voted 99-1 to take out that AI deregulation language, Trump announced a so-called AI action plan, which includes 2 directives. One instructed the White House to limit funding to states if their AI regulations are deemed too tough. Another called for modifying, or even rescinding, past federal law enforcement actions if they, quote, unduly burden AI innovation. Meanwhile, there could be a push in Congress for the provision to reappear in another legislative vehicle, such as the upcoming National Defense Bill.
It's like this very deep entanglement that is happening between the AI providers and the government that is supposed to be a counterbalance to these providers, but instead actually just realigning their infrastructure to be dependent on the very companies they're meant to govern.
It's a bit like that line from Terminator, a line that was meant to freak us out about the dangers of AI.
That Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop, ever. until you are dead.
But it also seems to perfectly describe the political alliance between big tech and the Trump administration, as they relentlessly continue trying to clear away any regulatory limits on the tech industry. The terrors of the Terminator movies don't have to be our future. There are ways to put in place some basic safeguards, but that won't happen if the tech oligarchs that buy elections and the politicians who run our government aren't forced to change. In pushing us down this deregulatory path, they're behaving not like thinking human beings, but like the terrifying robots they aim to build. The kind that are so single-mindedly focused on their programmed objectives that they ignore the warning signs flashing right in front of their eyes.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Lever Time. Lever Time is a production of The Lever. This episode was produced by Natalie Bettendorf. It was edited by me, David Sirota, and mixed by Ron Doyle. Our fact checker is Chris Walker. You can subscribe to Lever Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, the PRX mobile app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, for ad-free episodes, exclusive bonus content, and access to The Lever's entire archive of investigative journalism, please consider becoming a premium subscriber. Head over to levernews.com to learn more about becoming a paid subscriber, or click the link in the episode's show notes. I'm David Sirota. We'll be back later this week with another episode of Lever Time.